The wind never stopped singing across the plains of Arinder. 9. It whispered through jagged crystal outcrops and hummed against the skeletal remains of long-abandoned settlements, carrying with it the memory of a species that had learned, too late, how to survive itself. The sky was a permanent twilight, violet clouds layered like bruises over a fading sun, and the air shimmered faintly with radiation storms that came and went like tides. To humans, Arinder 9 was a frontier planet, hostile, inconvenient, and mostly ignored. To her kind, it was the only place left. Lira stood at the edge of the settlement, her bare feet pressed against the cool metallic ground. The platform beneath her pulsed faintly, alive with the quiet energy systems that kept the colony breathing. She stared out into the vast emptiness, her pale, translucent skin catching the dim light, veins glowing faintly with bioluminescent threads. Behind her, the colony stirred, soft movements, hushed voices, the sound of fragile life clinging together. But none of them came to stand beside her. They rarely did. Lira had always been different, even among the remnants of her species. Taller, stronger, more resilient, but also more dangerous. Her genetic profile was unstable, unpredictable. The elders had said it made her valuable. They had also said it made her unwanted. She exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the chilled air. "No one marries my kind," she murmured, though no one was there to hear it. "But I can bear children." The words felt hollow now, repeated too many times, spoken into silence. It wasn't just about companionship. For her people, reproduction was survival. Their numbers had dwindled to less than 1,000 across the planet. Every birth mattered. Every genetic pairing was calculated, planned, debated. And every time her name came up, it was dismissed. Too unstable. Too risky. Too different. She had watched others pair off, form bonds, create families that filled the empty spaces of the colony with laughter and purpose. She had smiled for them, even helped care for their young. But she had never been chosen. A faint tremor passed through the ground, distant, mechanical. Lyra's gaze sharpened. That wasn't one of theirs. She turned toward the horizon. A human dropship was descending. The colony gathered quickly. Humans rarely visited Arinder 9, and when they did, it was never without reason. Trade, research, sometimes salvage operations, but always brief, always cautious. The radiation storms made extended stays dangerous, even with advanced shielding. The ship landed just beyond the perimeter, its engines hissing as they powered down. Dust and fine crystalline particles swirled in its wake, catching the light like shattered glass. Lira remained at the back of the crowd, her posture still, her expression unreadable. She watched as the hatch opened, and a small group of humans stepped out. They wore reinforced suits, marked with faded insignias. Military or former military. Their movements were efficient but not rigid, less like active soldiers, more like those who had learned to carry discipline as habit rather than obligation. At their center was a man who moved differently, slower, heavier, not physically but in presence. His armor was worn, patched in places, and he walked with a slight limp, his left leg clearly augmented with a mechanical brace. A scar cut across the side of his face, disappearing into short, graying hair. He paused just outside the ship, scanning the colony. When his eyes met Lyra's, something shifted. Not fear, not curiosity, recognition. It startled her enough that she looked away. The elders stepped forward to greet the visitors, their voices formal, cautious. Negotiations began almost immediately. Supplies, data exchange, temporary shelter from an incoming storm. Lira only half listened. Her attention kept drifting back to the man. He had moved to the side, observing rather than participating. His gaze swept over the colony, taking in details others might miss. The reinforced structures, the positioning of defense nodes, the subtle signs of strain in the infrastructure. And then, inevitably, his eyes returned to her. She felt it like a weight. After a moment, she turned and walked away. The storm came faster than expected. By the time the humans had unloaded their supplies, the sky had darkened further, the violet clouds churning into a violent spiral. Static crackled through the air, and the distant horizon lit up with arcs of energy that danced like lightning but lingered far longer. Everyone moved quickly. The humans were ushered into the main structure, a reinforced dome designed to withstand the worst of Arinder 9's tempests. Shields activated with a low hum, and the outside world blurred into a storm of light and sound. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but controlled. Lira kept to the edges, helping where needed, avoiding attention. She carried equipment, secured panels, checked on the younger ones. And still, she felt his gaze. Eventually, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She turned. He was standing near one of the observation ports, his helmet removed, revealing a face lined with age and experience. Up close, the scar on his face was more pronounced, and there were others, faint but numerous. He didn't look away when she met his eyes. Instead, he spoke. "You're not like the others." His voice was calm, steady, with a roughness that suggested long use rather than emotion. Lira hesitated. "No," she said simply. He nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "Name?" "Lira." "I'm Kael." She didn't ask for more. Humans often offered names without titles, ranks, or affiliations. It was a habit she found strangely intimate. They stood in silence for a moment, the storm raging beyond the reinforced walls. Finally, he gestured toward the others. "They seem careful around you." Lira let out a quiet breath. "They are." "Why?" She studied him, searching for mockery, pity, or simple curiosity. She found none. "Because I am not safe," she said. Kael raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're standing here, helping them survive a radiation storm. Doesn't look unsafe to me." "That's not what they fear." "Then what?" Lira hesitated again. She hadn't spoken of this to an outsider before. To her own people, it was understood. To humans, she wasn't sure they would understand at all. But something in his gaze, steady, unflinching, made her answer. "My genetics are unstable," she said. "Adaptive, but unpredictable. If I reproduce, the offspring could be stronger than any of us, or they could fail to survive. There is no certainty." Kael considered that. "Sounds like evolution." "It sounds like a risk they cannot afford," she corrected. "Our population is too small. Every birth must be viable, controlled. And you don't fit into that control."
"No."
Silence stretched between them again, filled only by the distant roar of the storm. Then Lira added more quietly, "No one marries my kind, but I can bear children." The words felt heavier this time. Final. Kael didn't respond immediately. He leaned slightly against the wall, his mechanical brace emitting a faint whir as it adjusted. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer but not weaker. "Where I come from," he said, "there was a war." Lira said nothing, sensing he would continue. "We lost a lot of people. Not just soldiers, everyone. Cities gone. Entire regions uninhabitable. For a while, it felt like we were just trying to hold on to whatever was left." He looked down at his hands. "We had rules too. Who should have children? Who shouldn't? Genetic screenings, compatibility indexes, all of it." Lira tilted her head slightly. And it didn't save us." She frowned faintly. "What saved us," Kael continued, "was the people who didn't fit the plan. The ones who were too risky. They adapted in ways we didn't expect, found solutions we hadn't considered. He looked up at her again. Survival isn't just about control. It's about change. Lira felt something tighten in her chest. That is easy to say when your species is not on the edge of extinction, she said quietly. Kael shook his head. It wasn't easy then either. The storm outside intensified, a bright flash illuminating the interior for a brief moment. In that instant, Lira saw something in his expression she hadn't noticed before. Not just experience. Loss. Deep, unhealed loss. You've lost someone, she said. It wasn't a question. Kael's jaw tightened slightly. Yeah. Family? He hesitated, then nodded. A partner. And a child. Both gone before they had a chance to become anything. Lira didn't know what to say. Among her people, loss was common, but it was shared, communal. The idea of carrying it alone, as he seemed to, felt heavy. I'm sorry, she said. Kael shrugged, but it was a hollow gesture. Doesn't change anything. Another silence. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, but it does make you think differently about what's worth risking. Lira looked at him, really looked this time. At the scars. At the weariness. At the quiet strength that didn't demand attention, but held it anyway. You would take that risk? She asked. With you, he said. The words were simple. Direct. They hit her harder than anything else he had said. Lyra's breath caught. You don't even know me, she said. Kael gave a faint, almost amused smile. I know enough. That is not how this works. Maybe not for you. For my people, it is everything. He pushed himself upright, stepping closer. Not invading her space, but close enough that she could see the subtle tremor in his hands, the slight imbalance in his stance. I've spent most of my life following plans, he said. Orders. Protocols. Calculations. He paused. Didn't stop me from losing everything that mattered. Lira felt her pulse quicken. This isn't a battlefield decision, she said. No, Kael agreed. It's more important than that. The storm began to subside, the violent flashes outside dimming to a steady glow. Inside, the colony remained quiet, most of its inhabitants resting or conserving energy. It felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. You would be alone here, Lira said. Humans do not stay on Arinder, 9. Maybe I'm tired of leaving. You would be an outsider. He gave a small, dry laugh. I've been one of those for a long time. Lira searched his face for doubt. She found none, only a kind of steady resolve that both frightened and fascinated her. Why? She asked finally. Why would you choose this? Kael met her gaze. Because you're not broken, he said. You're just not what they expected. The words settled into her, deep and unyielding. For so long, she had been defined by what she wasn't. Not safe, not suitable, not chosen. And now, not broken. The storm ended. In the days that followed, the colony changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but subtly, undeniably. Kael stayed. At first, it was practical. The storm had damaged his ship's navigation systems, and repairs would take time. The elders allowed it, though their approval was cautious, measured. They watched him closely. He worked without complaint, assisting with repairs, reinforcing structures, sharing knowledge of human engineering that proved unexpectedly useful. He didn't try to lead, didn't impose himself. He simply stayed. And in staying, he became part of the rhythm of the colony. Lira found herself drawn to him in ways she didn't fully understand. They spoke often, their conversations ranging from practical matters to abstract ideas. He told her about Earth, its vast oceans, its crowded cities, its endless diversity. She told him about her people's history, their fall, their struggle to adapt. He listened, really listened. It was a rare thing. The others began to notice. Whispers spread, quiet but persistent. Some were curious. Others were wary. A few were openly disapproving. The elders, as always, deliberated. One evening, they called Lira to the central chamber. She stood before them, her posture straight, her expression calm. But inside, her thoughts churned. "You have grown close to the human," one elder said. "Yes. You understand the implications." "I do." Another elder leaned forward slightly. "This is not just a personal matter. It affects the entire colony." "I know. His genetics are incompatible with ours in predictable ways," a third added. "Any offspring would be unprecedented." Lira met their gaze. "So am I." A murmur passed through the chamber. The first elder studied her carefully. "You would proceed, despite the risks?" Lira hesitated, not because she doubted her answer, but because she understood its weight. "Yes," she said finally. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, another voice spoke. "You always were meant to." The elders turned. Kael stood at the entrance. He hadn't been summoned, but he had come anyway. "This is not your place," one elder said sharply. "Maybe not," Kael replied, "but this involves me." "You presume much." "I've earned the right to speak," he said evenly. "Same as anyone here." The tension in the room thickened. Lira felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't move to stop him. She wanted to hear this. "You're afraid," Kael continued. "I get that. You've got a small population, limited resources, and no room for mistakes." "That is an oversimplification," an elder snapped. "Maybe," Kael said, "but it's not wrong." He took another step forward. "But here's the thing. You're already dying." The words hit like a shockwave. "You maintain stability," he went on. "You control variables. You minimize risk. And yet, your numbers keep dropping." No one spoke. "Because stability isn't the same as survival," Kael said. "At some point you need something new. Something different." He gestured toward Lira. "You already have that." The elders exchanged glances, their composure strained. "And if it fails?" one asked quietly. Kael didn't hesitate. "Then it fails," he said. "But at least you tried something that might actually change your future." The chamber fell silent. Lira felt something shift, not just in the room, but within herself. For the first time, the fear that had always surrounded her didn't feel like a wall. It felt like something that could be pushed through. Finally, the eldest among them spoke. "We will consider this." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. For Lira, it was enough. The decision came days later. It was cautious, conditional, but it was a yes. The colony would allow the pairing, not as a norm, not as a precedent, but as an exception. Lira stood outside the settlement again, the wind singing its endless song. Kael joined her, his steps slower but steady. "So," he said, "guess I'm staying longer than planned." She glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "It would seem so." He looked out at the horizon. "You sure about this?" Lira followed his gaze. The world beyond was still harsh, still uncertain. Nothing had changed there, but everything had changed here. "Yes," she said. Kael nodded. "Good," he replied. For a while, they stood in silence. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just present. After a moment, Lira spoke again. "I was never chosen," she said. Kael glanced at her. "You are now." She shook her head slightly. "That is not what I mean." He waited. "I thought that meant something was wrong with me," she continued. "That I was a less." Kael's expression softened. "And now?" Lira looked at her hands, at the faint glow beneath her skin. Now I think it just means I was waiting for something different. Kael smiled faintly. Yeah, he said. Sometimes that's exactly what it means. The wind carried their silence across the plains, blending it into the endless song of Arinder. 9. Unwanted, but not broken. And finally, not alone.